While WNBA executives were locked in emergency meetings, Caitlyn Clark was sitting front row at Prada in Milan. No press statements, no union rallies, no visible concern. Just cameras flashing, luxury brands, and a smile that said everything, without saying a single word. And the timing? That's what makes this impossible to ignore. Let's set the scene. Milan Fashion Week isn't a casual invite. You don't just show up to Prada. You're selected, chosen, placed. And Clark wasn't seated in the back row being polite. She was front row, the position reserved for brand assets, not guests. The cameras didn't treat her like an athlete on vacation. They treated her like a headliner. Within hours, photos spread across fashion blogs, culture pages, entertainment outlets, and sports media simultaneously. She wasn't being framed as a WNBA player. She was being framed as a global figure. And that framing matters more than most people realize. Because here's what changes when an athlete's identity expands beyond their league. Their leverage changes. Your relevance is no longer tied to game nights or contract windows. It becomes international, cross-industry, brand-driven. While executives debated revenue percentages back home, Clark was doing something far more durable. She was building independence. Now let's talk about what was actually happening back in the United States, because this is where the contrast gets sharp. There's a date that had every WNBA insider on edge, March 10th. For the first time in league history, revenue sharing had been triggered. That's historic. It means the league crossed financial thresholds that opened the door for players to receive earnings beyond base salaries. But that's where the good news ends. Players want revenue sharing tied directly to salary structures going forward, percentages that reflect the explosion in ratings, ticket sales, and sponsorships. Ownership, on the other hand, is focused on long-term sustainability, expansion costs, and infrastructure. Neither side sees the other's offer as enough. And then the league dropped a hard deadline. Finalize a term sheet by March 10th or the season gets impacted. That word, impacted. It doesn't mean canceled, but it doesn't mean nothing either. And when players heard it, especially after reports that the league had taken weeks to respond earlier in negotiations, it felt like pressure, rush tactics, a forced hand. Here's why that's dangerous. Nearly the entire veteran class is approaching free agency. Expansion logistics are unresolved. Housing benefits are still being debated. You don't rush foundational decisions without consequences. And in the middle of all this tension, the league's biggest star is calmly sitting in a front-row chair in Italy. That contrast didn't happen in a vacuum. Now here's the part nobody in an official press conference wants to say out loud, but fans already have. The growth the WNBA has experienced, it didn't fall from the sky. Arenas that once had empty seats became sold-out venues, not because of the home team, but because fans traveled specifically to watch one player. Road games started feeling like neutral site events. Ratings climbed past projections. Merchandise demand outpaced supply. Mainstream media started covering the WNBA the way it covers the NBA. All of this happened in the same era Caitlyn Clark entered the league. Is she the only reason? No. The foundation was already there. Elite athletes, veteran talent, championship pedigree. But momentum needs a spark, and Clark became that spark. And when one individual's presence aligns directly with a revenue acceleration, that individual becomes central to the system's stability. You don't have to demand influence. Influence reveals itself. Here's what makes this situation truly fascinating. Caitlyn Clark hasn't said a single word. No tweets, no press conferences, no subtle interviews hinting at tension, no alignment with ownership, no alignment with the union, just silence. And in negotiation strategy, that's not weakness, that's control. Most athletes react when pressure builds. They speak out, take sides, apply vocal pressure. Clark did something different. She redirected entirely. Different industry, different continent, different audience, while staying completely composed. That's not avoidance. That's positioning. Think about the psychology of this from an ownership perspective. You're in a negotiation room debating revenue splits. The deadline is approaching, and the player most responsible for your revenue surge isn't panicking. She's expanding her brand in luxury fashion markets overseas. That forces a question nobody wants to ask out loud. Who actually needs who more right now? Here's what most people are missing in this story. This isn't really about Milan. It's not even really about March 10th. And it's bigger than a revenue percentage. What we might be watching is the beginning of a structural shift in how power works inside professional women's basketball. Historically, leagues define player value. They set salary caps, revenue splits, ecosystem rules. Players operate inside that framework. But when a player's influence extends beyond that framework, into global culture, luxury branding, mainstream media, the balance quietly changes. Clark doesn't just drive basketball metrics. She drives economic behavior. Cities she visited saw road attendance surge. Markets that had never drawn national attention suddenly became must-watch events. Sponsors aligned not just with the league, but specifically with her presence. That's not a typical athlete dynamic. That's a cultural bridge. And cultural bridges don't disappear when a deadline passes. If the season faces instability, sponsors question confidence, broadcast partners recalculate, expansion markets hesitate, Clark's trajectory doesn't pause. Her brand partnerships continue. Her global visibility continues. Her cultural relevance continues. That's insulation. And insulation changes how you move through uncertainty. Let's zoom out 5 years. The league expands further. New media deals arrive. Global partnerships multiply. If Clark continues building at this pace, cross-industry relevance, international brand recognition, mainstream cultural presence, she becomes something genuinely rare. An athlete whose orbit pulls audiences from fashion, entertainment, sports, and culture simultaneously. And here's the quiet impact of that. Younger players are watching. Future draft classes are watching. International prospects are watching. They're seeing that it's possible to build an identity that isn't fully contained within a league's structure. The next generation won't just negotiate salaries, they'll negotiate ecosystems. Clark's positioning might unintentionally redefine expectations for what a professional women's basketball career looks like, not through rebellion, but through evolution. And evolution doesn't announce itself. It simply becomes normal. Here's the reality. Caitlyn Clark didn't call a press conference. She didn't post a statement. She didn't choose a side. She didn't insert herself into the headline. She simply showed up somewhere else. And sometimes, that's louder than anything you could say. While the league debates structure, she's expanding influence. While deadlines approach, she's reinforcing independence. While negotiations intensify, she's demonstrating that her value doesn't begin or end with a signed agreement. That's not a threat. That's a new kind of leverage. An agreement will likely be reached. The season will probably move forward. But this moment, this quiet contrast between negotiation rooms and Milan runway lights, revealed something that can't be unseen. The power dynamic in women's basketball isn't what it used to be. And if you think this is just about percentages, you're missing the larger shift happening in real time. This isn't just a CBA battle. It's the beginning of a new era. And it started, not with a press conference, but with a front-row seat at Prada. If you want real breakdowns when the next update drops, not surface headlines but the deeper power plays behind them, hit subscribe right now. Because what comes after that March deadline could reshape the WNBA for years to come. We'll be here breaking down every move. Stay locked in.